Hello, you are watching Roundtable. Now, it may seem too good to be true, working from a sunny city by the beach rather than on a 9 to 5 at the office. Well, that is exactly what the so-called digital nomads are doing. European countries are taking advantage of the increasing popularity of remote work by issuing special visas to attract digital nomads into their countries. There is, though, a flip side to this. Digital nomads are apparently driving up rents in cities such as Lisbon and Barcelona, to name but two. So, could this new lifestyle be contributing to a cost of living crisis in European cities? Very good to have you along. I'm David Foster. The remote work lifestyle is booming in Europe, leading several governments across the continent to set in place policies to attract even more digital nomads. Croatia and Estonia are just two of them, with Portugal becoming the latest country to introduce a visa for remote workers. With more individuals making high incomes, settling into European countries where the average purchasing power is much lower than theirs, will locals be able to afford to live in their own cities? Well, we are very firmly rooted in the studio. We are not nomadic in any way, so let me introduce Dave Cook, anthropologist at University College London, who's conducting a 7-year study on digital nomads. We go to Lisbon and say hello to Rita Silva, a board member of Habita, which is a housing campaign group. And in Oxford, in the UK, John Mulbar, professor of economics at the University of Oxford. I must declare an interest, first of all, in this. One of my daughters is a digital nomad. She's been going around the United States in a converted bus and living in that for about 1.5 years, and now she's next to a beach in Mexico. She loves it. She's doing very well out of it. I've got that out of the way. Yep. I want to ask you, first of all, Rita, if I may, there are pluses and minuses in this. What about the city of Lisbon? Are people more concerned about what's happening, or are they delighted?
Well, I think we cannot speak about a consensus that there are people that think it is a good thing, and there are people that are criticizing it because they understand the impact and the consequences. I wanted to say that it's not that we are against the people that have this option, like your daughter, to make this digital nomading and working and traveling. It's not that we are against these people, but we think that the politics that are behind the attraction of wealthy foreigners that is connected with other politics are not balanced and not adequate to our own reality. So in Lisbon, people are mainly very angry about a huge housing crisis. People cannot afford the rents here, and the problem is getting worse and worse. So people are worried about the housing crisis. It's not that they are against digital nomads.
Okay, so there have been protests on the streets of Lisbon, which I know you were part of. These wealthy foreigners, though, as you refer to them, bring money to Portugal. The government's very keen to have them there. I don't know how much in terms of tax they pay, but they spend money in local shops, they buy food, they help support businesses. It's a difficult one, isn't it?
Yes, but let's put all these, I think it is more complex than that they just bring money, okay? Yes, people bring money. In fact, they don't pay almost any taxes, because it's not just the digital nomads visa that the government created now. The government also created other policies in the last 10 years, like the golden visas and the non-permanent residents. And the non-permanent residents, for example, they can come to Portugal if they have a status of non-permanent resident. They don't pay almost any taxes. So these kind of politics, they combine each other. And in fact, these wealthy foreigners are not paying almost any taxes. But they bring money, is true. But we need to see what are the impacts that this money creates in our society. If they bring money to pay higher rents and higher houses, the market goes inflated and we cannot afford the houses anymore. It also can create jobs, of course. We are a country that is very much dependent today on tourism, and this is a kind of tourism. But the kinds of jobs that tourism creates are very precarious jobs, very low paid. And the cost of this is that people are less paid and cannot afford to live here anymore.
Can I bring in Dave, because
as a more problematic.
I want to bring everybody in as quickly as possible.
Sure.
A 7-year study into this, and I assumed that it may have started round about the time of the pandemic and would be going on for another 5 years, but in fact it started a long time ago. So this isn't a new concept, is it?
No, it's not entirely new, and I think Rita said that it's a complex, evolving situation, and digital nomadism before the pandemic, I think we need to think about that in slightly different terms. It was a very emerging niche lifestyle. When I started research in Southeast Asia, mainly in Thailand, in 2015, we're talking about very small numbers. So I think we need to be clear about what we're talking about.
But did you see a pattern emerging at that time? Or what made you think it was an interesting subject? Something we ought to know more about?
Yeah, I mean, I was always going to do a study on people moving, transnationalism. I was interested in the idea of what happens when people who have strong passports, they have the privilege and the wealth to be able to go and travel. And I could see that this was going to expand very, very quickly. So that's why I started to conduct research.
And what would you say is the most interesting thing that you've discovered? I know it's complex, and I'm asking you to distill it into one little bit, but what would you say really strikes you about this?
I think the really interesting thing is it's creating a new culture. Rita talked about precarious jobs. A lot of digital nomads are freelancers. A lot of them do very well, but a lot of digital nomads do suffer from burnout. They can lose their jobs. They might have very low-paying jobs. And maybe that's something that we can talk about later, because
this interests me. You said most of them are freelancers, which presupposes that they aren't all, and therefore some of them have full-time jobs with particular companies, and they're allowed to work from the beach anywhere in the world where they choose to move to?
Yeah, I think if we're going to talk post-lockdowns, the whole idea of having a digital nomad life has now caught fire for anybody who's a remote worker. So the concept of salaried workers that can go and work in different places, I think, is a slightly new category. It's like different to digital nomads.
But there are still some people who do that.
There are, and it very much depends on the company culture and whether they allow people to do that. So I do consult with some companies, and some tell me that they want people not just in the office, but they want people in the same country, and it's kind of a form of control.
Fascinating, fascinating. I want to know if you've come to any conclusions during the course of the 7 years. John, let me bring you in after we've taken a look at this map, because we've already talked about visas. 13 European governments apparently already created some form of visa for digital nomads. It is likely to increase. I'm sure we're all agreed on that. They are Croatia, Czech Republic, Estonia, Finland, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Italy, Malta, Portugal, Romania, Spain, and Norway. You may know of others that we haven't got in that, and you may know of some that are thinking of increasing the number of visas. This is simply the way of the world now, isn't it? Countries, not just companies, but countries have to be prepared for this.
Yeah, let me just mention the work by Richard Baldwin from Geneva, a very famous economist who's written a book on globotics, in which he talks about the emerging trend of services being outsourced across the planet, and much greater competition for service jobs from places that you might not have previously thought of as providing competition. So that's, I think, digital nomads needs to be put into that context. It's a bigger phenomenon that's going on there, the internationally serviced jobs in the service sector. for me, the housing issues, I think the two critical ones are inequality and efficient use of the housing stock. So it seems to me that if owners of second homes, foreign investors, buy up for speculative reasons, for investment return reasons, a lot of property, and then that property remains off the market or is only used for 2 months of the year or 3 months or 4 months of the year, then that removes a lot of the stock from the market.
But what has that got to do with digital nomads? Are you suggesting that governments, give me just a second if you don't mind, that governments should use this spare stock, this empty housing that you talk about, to put the digital nomads in so they don't take up other rentable accommodation?
So I'm talking about something that I think that these protests in Lisbon and other places, London, New York, have maybe less to do with digital nomads as such, as with investors entering the rental market, buying up properties, and if these second homeowners or third homeowners keep those properties off the market, because, for example, they're just catering to a seasonal tourist trade, then that puts a lot of pressure on housing availability for the rest of society.
Okay, and I see Rita, I will come to you in just a second, I promise, Dave, but I see Rita nodding, and since you're listening intently to what John is saying, you think it's not so much about the digital nomads as about inequality per se? Is that right?
The problem is the effects that it creates in society. For example, Lisbon has today more than 20,000 short-term rental apartments just for Airbnb. That was the traditional tourism. That is already huge. We are a small city. And now they are, with this new politics for digital nomads that have to earn more than 2,800 euros, they are attracting more people. And they say that they aim to arrive to 3,000 digital nomads every month until the end of the year.
So they are adding to a problem that is already there, I think is what you're saying. I want to bring Dave back in because you were keen to say something and I had to shut you up. Apologies for that.
Oh, no, that's fine. I mean, yeah, I just wanted to give a concrete example. So most of my research is in Chiang Mai. You said empty apartments. I think that in a lot of circumstances, they're not empty. So I went to an Airbnb and I started interviewing people that were using this block of flats. And they put a big sign outside saying that this is not for short-term lets. These are built for local residents. But pretty much everybody that was going in with a wheelie suitcase was staying in an Airbnb. And companies, not individuals, had bought up leases within this block of flats.
So local companies posing as people from that area who needed housing have done this?
I think that some were local and some were international. So, yeah, they were also leafleting people in the building, asking if they could take over their leases. So this isn't just digital nomads, it's tourists going into these kind of places. But this kind of stuff is really, really catching fire.
The tourists have to stay somewhere, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And
otherwise they wouldn't be tourists there.
If Airbnb is going to act like a hotel, I think that they need to get people to get tourist permits in the same way that hotels do.
OK. John, I had to stop you because I wanted to bring Rita back in. I hope I didn't cut you off mid-flow. But you were talking about this being a larger problem than the one that we headlined at the beginning of the programme.
Yeah, I wanted to make the point that these issues are ones that arise all over the world. Now, Venice is a fantastic example. In Venice, rents, house prices and so on are very, very high indeed, and the locals simply can't afford to live there. So the great majority of the working population of Venice has to commute in from outside every day and return home. And, you know, that's pretty disruptive. It's not very good for extended families, for example, where kids and grandparents are needed. And it's a prime example of where the tourist trade and the investors have crowded out affordability for local workers.
But my point is that you cannot exist in a town such as Venice without the tourists. That is its raison d'etre, and therefore you have to accommodate them somehow. As we all know, in Venice, there is limited space. How do you solve that conundrum?
Well, I think the balance in many places the balance isn't right. I mean, it's very well, to welcome tourists, but for example, you could have public housing. You could have affordable public housing that coexists with tourist residences, and there's also the issue of occupancy. I mean, if many of the buildings in Venice are occupied by wealthy foreigners who are there just three months of the year and who prefer to keep the properties empty for the rest of the year, and that is a very inefficient use of the housing stock. Now, I agree that Airbnb might actually make utilization better, it might create a higher rate of usage of the housing stock. But that balance is one that you really need to achieve.
This is something, Rita, that you've already referred to. This is from Ana Catarina Mendes, Portuguese cabinet minister. Portugal is a country of immigration that needs immigrants, that needs and benefits from the contribution of immigrants to its demographics, to its economy, to its culture. And I read that Portugal's been working on this plan for 10 years, that you referred to in Porto. There will be fairly soon an extra 3,000 digital nomads. How is the government of Portugal, which recognises this as an issue, which is encouraging it, how is it responding to the problems that you say you encounter on a daily basis?
Well, I think the Portuguese government just has one plan, which is to promote policies to attract foreign investment and foreign capital. The question that we are posing is that it's not enough to attract foreign capital to have development, and that doesn't revert directly in development. Okay, and this way of attracting investment through that, the main objective is to feed a market of real estate and the labor market.
So are you saying it's doing nothing?
A huge inequality. Is usually now what the government is doing is promoting different forms that increase the real estate speculation. Okay, like the golden visas, like the non-permanent residents, like the digital nomads, and like the other tax exemptions and attraction of these investors for real estate. So what the government is doing is this, and is not creating another policy that permits people to have a place to live. And this is very serious. Because
okay, so it's making matters worse rather than doing anything to address them. Can I bring David? You talked to me before we came into the studio about some of the dangers of this. Is that personal dangers to those people who live this kind of lifestyle? Or are they the societal dangers that we're seeing Rita referring to there? And also John?
Both. I think where this conversation is going is about having these neoliberal policies and trying to get high net worth individuals into places like Portugal, and then not thinking through what happens next. I've been to Lisbon as a tourist, and I could see the gentrification. I could see that in the same way that John was talking about Venice, local people are going to have to travel in and out and to service all of these high net worth individuals or higher paying tourists that are coming in. But you can see that neighbourhoods are being hollowed out. I would hate that to happen in Chiang Mai. I don't think it's quite happened yet. There are arguments that it has happened. But yeah, there needs to be the ability to have legislation on a local level as well as a national level in order to deal with
those are the societal dangers, or some of them. What about the individual issues of safety that might come up?
Well, I mean, in terms, one of the things that when we think of digital nomads, we see people working on laptops in hammocks, and we think of people that have highly skilled jobs, they're freelancers earning money. But there is an emerging trend of younger people going to do this kind of ghost work, or this crowdsourced work that John was referring to, where they might get paid very small amounts of money for doing tasks on their laptops and then living very cheaply in a place with lower living costs.
Well, it swings and roundabouts,
yeah.
isn't it? You know, you live somewhere that's absolutely wonderful. It doesn't cost you too much money, but in return, you're not earning very much money yourself.
Yeah,
so
but
you can afford it.
It can become a new type of precarity as well, and I'm not talking about mainstream digital nomads there. But I do see a lot of digital nomads turning up in places like Southeast Asia and Thailand, and then disappearing from the scene, because it's quite hard to do. It's quite hard to move from place to place and keep a routine going, keep good mental health going. And I would say about 90% of the people that I meet starting out on the lifestyle give up on it within a year.
Goodness gracious. John, you say governments have got to change, they've got to get used to this kind of thing. Are there any progressive countries with regard to that?
Well, let me just talk about neoliberal policies and possible responses. I mean, one simple point is that digital nomads should pay taxes where they work. So local taxes should be paid by them, and that includes income tax. And secondly, very often the tax structure of taxation of property should be adapted to take into account the fact that if a property is an Airbnb property year-round, then it's essentially a commercial property. It's no longer part of the residential. It's no longer. It shouldn't be taxed like an owner-occupied property. It should be taxed at a higher rate that typically business properties are taxed at. In the UK, we have a very dysfunctional property tax system where the tax rate per value of property is far, far lower for expensive properties than it is for the properties where low-income people live. We have a very regressive property tax system. If we fix that, and if we made sure that second homes were taxed more heavily than owner-occupied properties, that would certainly, while not solving the problem, would make the problem a lot less worse.
I get it. Let's just throw up some more figures before we wrap up the programme. We don't have very long. It's thought, 35 million people are digital nomads. A study discovering that in 2020, there were already 10.9 million so described, which was an increase of 49% on the year before.
Yeah, so I don't know where those figures are from, but I think we have to be careful, again, about our definitions, and that could just be referring to remote workers that are moving about, and I think that's slightly different.
But it's only ever going to go up, isn't it?
I think.
Or can you see it peaking?
No, I'm seeing a culture created where this lifestyle is becoming legitimised, so we are going to see bigger numbers. And just to point to one of the things that John said, digital nomads and tax. Digital nomads, when they go to another country, are normally travelling on tourist visas at the moment. So they're not registering for tax. They're going under the radar.
Just so nobody goes after my daughter, she pays tax. She's tax-based in...
Where does she pay tax?
In Colorado, in the United States. Right. She has a green card, so she's OK for that. A quick one from you, Rita, if I may. Those protests that we saw at the beginning, maybe we'll bring the pictures up again now. Is this something new? Is it building? And what do people say they're going to do about it?
Yeah, I think we are going to have a new wave of protest because we have the inflation problems that are going around. We have a lot of families that saw the mortgage increase in 50% in the last month. And we also have crazy rents because people cannot afford the rents. Just for you to see, for example, today, doctors, teachers, and these professions that we need for the public system, they cannot afford the rent in Lisbon, so they don't come to Lisbon or to the Lisbon metropolitan area or to Porto because they cannot afford a house there. So we have a shortage of doctors, of teachers, and students. We have a lot of students that have no place to live because a huge stock of a housing stock is being transferred to this short-term
I get it. It's not just about convenience, being able to travel into the city you want to travel into. These are people who, if not the students, the other ones you mentioned, who provide absolutely vital services. And without them, a community cannot exist. Listen, thank you very, very much indeed. Dave, thank you very much. When your study is finished, come and tell us what the results are. Great pleasure to see you here. Thank you very much for watching this edition of Roundtable, wherever you happen to be doing so. I'm David Foster from me and the team. Until next time, goodbye.